Hello. Buenos tardes, Puebla. It's my first time here. I love it. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. I'm very excited to be able to present some of our work. When my partners Liz Diller and Rick Scofidio started the practice, Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro in 1979, they did it very small scale. They did it through dance projects and theater projects and film projects. They did it in ways that they could do on their own, financing with their own credit cards. They had no idea that at a certain point, our own work would become epic. And so today, I think I would like to talk about the two sides, the tale of two offices, our work, DSR, that has managed to grow the practice in such a way that the work that it does is around the world, and it affects many, many, many people's lives. And sometimes it's actually improbable. Our projects are improbable, and one I would start with is Zaryadye Park that we completed 2 years ago in Moscow. If you notice, the Kremlin is right there. Putin's landing pad is right there. And we, the Americans, led by a gay architect and his Jewish and black partner, won the competition to redesign the center of Moscow. Couldn't believe that. And here it is. Even though this seems like a foreign kind of landscape, it's actually made up of landscapes of Russia. The birch forests, the wetlands, the tundra. We brought those into Russia. We made this park be about being there. And we made the park be about being lost, but also finding the city again. We're very interested in that in our practice. Making a spectacle of the place that you're in, not bringing foreign forms and objects, but actually looking at around you, looking at the places you're in. This is something that has driven our work forever. In Los Angeles, we had the great good fortune of building the Broad Museum, a very tiny museum. It opened in 2015, right next to Frank Gehry's Disney Concert Hall. Well, if you know that building, it's shiny and extravagant and actually quite wonderful, don't get me wrong. But we wanted to make a project that was introspective, that was absorptive, that took the light out of the sky, as this does, through this concrete screen, but that at the same time, it invited people to enter into its mysterious box of paintings. This thing that you go through and arrive at the gallery is actually a storage vault, a vault where all the paintings are held. And the gallery is up on the top, bathed in gorgeous California light. This is a room that does have walls in it and art in it, but I wanted to demonstrate the idea that we made an acre of column-free space to put any kind of art anywhere. And then on the way down, we give people glimpses of what is actually stored in the museum. This is a new idea where you don't just hold the holdings off in some foreign location, you actually let people experience them as part of the overall museum-going experience. One amazing thing about the Broad Museum is it has the youngest museum-going people in all of America. It's the poorest demographic of museum goers, and it's the least educated. Now, you may think that's a horrible thing, but we think that's a fantastic thing, and we think it's because the museum works in a way that attracts the youth to it. More recently, these are all the epic projects, by the way, and then we're going to get to the non-epic projects. More recently, we opened a little thing called The Shed, in New York City. It is surrounded by a grouping of buildings that are known as Hudson Yards, but the Shed itself is an independent arts organization. And we actually invented the Shed. We as architects came up with the idea of a building that would transform, that would go from a small, compact footprint to a very large footprint with a huge space that could produce any kind of culture, from film to dance to music to art and to any combination of the above. We had to think about what arts in the 21st century would look like, and what kind of architecture would support that. And so we thought an architecture that is able to transform and become whatever it needs to be whenever it needs to be it. So this outer shell of steel that glows, moves in and out over a fixed building. The fixed building's very simple, and it has pretty standard galleries that are very flexible. But the space itself that moves is, in fact, like an opera house fly tower, very much like what I'm standing under here, with rigs that can hoist several ton objects up, and lighting and acoustic systems that can be brought down. The walls can be made dark. It can be made acoustically quiet. It can be made to open up to the outside world through those guillotine doors. And so far, it's very early. We opened in April, but we've hosted such extravagant productions such as Bjork. Here she is. This is actually another one of the opening seasons, but you can see that the room itself can accommodate thousands of people, and is always different. Will be different every time you arrive. Closer to here, I suppose, is in Rio de Janeiro on Copacabana Beach, the MIS, the Museum of Image and Sound. This is a project that we built out of the city itself. It's a museum dedicated to artists of Rio de Janeiro and the arts of Brazil in general. And it's the only museum on the beaches in Rio. We wanted to make it out of the democratic surface of the beach. The beach itself takes everyone, fat, skinny, old, young, tall, short, gay, straight, families, singles. It's the most democratic surface in the world, perhaps. And we wanted to make the building literally out of the surface of the beach. So we made the building accessible to everyone without a ticket, to go up the building and to arrive at a park open and free of charge to everyone in the city of Rio, where you could only get up if you had money before. We are almost complete. We're about 80% complete. It got snagged up after the Olympics, but we do hope that it's going to be finished next year. There is some sign of that. And you can see a theme. This is a big project in London. It's for the London Symphony Orchestra, LSO, at the Barbican Center. And it's a huge building with a massive hall for 1,800 people and a hotel in the middle and another hall up top. But rather than make it be this massive monumental thing, what we wanted to do was make it be about the people, la gente, the people to come up into the building free of charge again, where they could wind their way up, almost like walking a trail on the side of a mountain, and see into this orchestra hall without a ticket from all the way around. Okay, that's the first part of my talk. I have 7 minutes left. If you can read that, it says epic. But it says it like this, epic, epic. Because I think the truly epic work comes with a real care about the way it's done. I'm trying to move it forward. New York City, an epic city. We have been given the chance to operate on New York City on 3 really major projects. I will touch on them very briefly here. But in my opinion, while we make big projects that are big formal gestures and they're city changing in the most dynamic and physical way, what we've done in our projects in New York City, which is much more strategic and surgical, I think might actually be the best thing we can do in our cities to keep them alive and to keep them great. Lincoln Center was made in the late 50s by this group of white men. And they were very powerful and very important. And they made this new piazza that was the center of New York City at 8 p.m. every day, and that's it. Otherwise, it looks like this. Abandoned, horrible, dark, windy, you can't see anything. Our approach towards the renovation and addition to Lincoln Center was to come in like a surgeon, to take a scalpel and hollow out places that would let people see in, to bring the theater outside and back to the city, but moreover, to make Lincoln Center become part of New York City again. It had the promise to do that from the very beginning, but it didn't. It turned its back on the city. It abandoned the city. It operated like an acropolis. What we did is we added media. We added outdoors video. We changed the whole public parks. We put a lawn probably on the roof of a restaurant, which has become very popular. We widened all the stairs, and we took the security guards away. They wanted the security guards to keep the locals out. We said, no, bring the locals in. Let them take ownership of the city. We brought performances outdoors. We let the spaces allow those performances to sing. We added on to the Juilliard School. This is a wonderful but horrible brutalist building, very massive and heavy. But we liked the building, and in a way, when we added onto it, we paid reverence to that building. We took the conditions of the south facade, and we made them 21st century. We put them all together, and we took a slice off the building, exposing all the inner workings of the world's most famous music school to the city of New York. Here you can see into janitor's closets, into a rehearsal room, and into a lobby, which now bridges between indoor and outdoor, again, open, free of charge. One of our big missions is to bring our work back into the places in which it inhabits. The High Line, probably our most known work. I hope you've been there. If not, you're going to be to one in a place near you, because it's one of the most copied urban parks. It's a Rails to Trails project, 1.5 miles. Originally, the line was going to be taken down after it was disused. Here you can see a poster. Stop the nonsense, take the line down. What could that possibly be? It went through neighborhoods where things like this were happening. There were abandoned neighborhoods, and a lot of people, well, they were abandoned except for certain members of society that appreciated the abandonedness. And then what happened is the green grew improbably on the line itself. This is after it was abandoned. It was a ruin. It was already a garden. So what we did is we just used all the clues that were there, the city, the clues of the green taking over the gray, and had those become the ideas, to generate the ideas to make this park. This park is tiny. This is the architecture right here. Those tapered pieces of concrete is all the design of the park. It allowed us to make walkways that meander back and forth. So your way of getting around is not scripted. It's not determined. You can actually lose yourself. It's very un-New York in a way. We took advantage of locations that could see long-distance views or required more intimate kinds of responses. We took advantage of found conditions, such as this big beam over 10th Avenue, where we cut a window into it and allowed people to descend into a grandstand where there is nothing to see and nothing to do. You simply look at car taillights. I mean, it was essentially turning the city into a protagonist. It was using what was there. Here, it leaps over the trees. These trees are now 40 feet tall. You're in the boughs of the trees. And what was wonderful about this is that people adopted this High Line. It became part of the ecology of the city, not just for the birds and the trees, but for the people. And buildings that it passed by and underneath and through started engaging in it in these ways that were kind of interesting and a lot of fun. And in a way, this kind of activity is better than any critic could ever write. So much so that when we, Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro, we decided to make an opera based on the things that were already happening to the project in which we designed. So our opera is based on the scenes that were playing out at the High Line. Here, it's called the Mile Long Opera. 1,000 singers stretched from one end to the other, and you, as the observer, go from one end to the other, getting all the stories, the intimate stories about New York City life in the city. So their narration is taking you back into the city, stitching you back in. And it was really brilliant. Last thing, I've got 1 minute left to talk to you about MoMA. MoMA opened just 2 weeks ago, so this is hot off of the presses. This is new stuff. But here is this project that you're barely gonna see. You're barely gonna notice. You know why? Because there have already been 7 architects that have worked before us. Philip Johnson, Edward Durrell Stone, Taniguchi, all these famous architects. Our little chunk is tiny. But what we knew before we started working on MoMA, what the other architects didn't know so much is how MoMA was beautiful and intimate, and those paintings were yours. You could take them. The plants, the fabric, these kinds of things made MoMA really intimate, and that had been lost with the last renovation. Our additions are these little sunken part and that little that tower. All we did was make new kinds of spaces that looked back to the city, that brought art down to the street, that let you walk through the galleries free of charge on the ground floor. And I know I'm out of time, but I'm almost done. And then also show how to get around a MoMA, which you never knew how to do, by adding the stair, a new entrance, very gracious, rich materials, finally bringing a sense of intimacy, wood, and a kind of spatial intimacy and excitement with this new stair, detailing of which had not ever been at MoMA before. And then kinds of sectional connections between galleries that make the galleries enliven and let the curators curate in a totally different way, where they're bringing all kinds of different art together in one place. And then this is a new kind of space that we added. It's a black box theater, but it's not. It's also a gallery. It can do everything: live performance, amplified performance. But most importantly, it's part of the city of New York. Gracias.